In our day, certain economic truths have become accepted as self-evident. A second Bill of Rights, under which a new basis of security and prosperity can be established for all, regardless of station or race or creed.
It's time for the fucking podcast.
Welcome everyone to the episode of Left Lens Live. We're not live actually, but we're live on TikTok. But this will get posted probably tomorrow. How you doing, James? I'm Matt, by the way, and that's James.
Hi, I'm doing terrible, and everything is terrible.
It is dystopia we live in these days, isn't it?
We are 82% through the year 2023, and every week it gets exponentially worse. It is.
I just want to know when we're done with the decade, because I think this entire decade has been a shit show.
That's a long way to go.
We can make it, though. Years. We can do it. We can get through it.
I don't know.
I think we can. All right. So on the agenda today, I decided we're going to talk about our agenda up front so people can know what they're going to hear later. We're going to talk about a little bit about climate change to start with. We're going to talk about the Maine mass shooting. We're going to talk about Trump's trials and tribulations in the judicial system. Of course, we're going to talk about the ongoing genocide in Gaza. And is World War III going to happen? I don't know. Some people are saying it is. We're talking about Armenia and Azerbaijan as a flashpoint for that. I have some thoughts on that. And then anything else you got in your mind, James, that we're going to add to that list?
We'll fill the gaps in along the way.
All right. We got some videos to share too, don't we?
Yes.
All right. So up front, Hurricane Otis. Okay. So Hurricane Otis happened last week. It hit Mexico, Acapulco specifically. What's remarkable about it is it went from a tropical storm where they weren't really predicting anything. You know, the forecasts were it's going to rain. To a devastating Category 5 hurricane that practically destroyed Acapulco in a matter of 2 or 3 days. That's how warm the Pacific Ocean is to fuel these things. So if you want to get in the comments and tell me why you don't think climate change is real, please go right ahead.
I was about to say, but it's all a hoax, right? It's not. Yeah, nothing's really
real.
happening.
It gets cold in the winter, so there's no such thing as climate change. Well, you know what else? I didn't put it on the list, but all the crabs that disappeared from Alaska, the snowshoe crabs.
This is not the first time that's happened. There was a thing when I saw that article broadcast the other day. It reminded me of a couple 3 years ago, maybe not even that long, that because are you talking about horseshoe crabs or Alaskan king crabs?
I think there were snow crabs that I don't know because I didn't.
Okay, because that happened. That happened a couple. Yeah, that happened a couple of years ago. So that was a huge red flag a couple of years ago that all these feeding and breeding grounds that are well known for these crabs vanished a couple of years ago, and so it's happened again.
It's happened again, and that's absolutely climate change related. I don't think we mentioned that in a previous episode, but a couple months ago they had millions of fish in Alabama, Mississippi wash up on shore, basically because there wasn't enough oxygen in the ocean because it was too warm. So they basically suffocated. So yeah, go ahead, get in the comments, argue with us about climate change, and tell us how it's a hoax. And we'll come back with even more stuff to prove that it's not. So I don't really have much more to say about that, but I just thought it was worth mentioning.
The general consensus on the reality of climate change is that we are probably past the tipping point, and our strategy needs to emphasize how do we adapt to this now that we've allowed this to happen. I would love to still believe that there was something we could do to reverse this, but I think we have screwed the pooch so deeply that we are left with nothing more than how to survive this and grappling with the actual losses that are happening in real time.
Well, you're right. I mean, they announced last week, I believe, that the so-called Doomsday Glacier that would cause the most significant rise in sea level. The glacier down in Antarctica was past saving. It is going to melt, and there's nothing we can do about it. They announced that last week. So it's too late for that one. So that's going to happen over the coming decades. People who live in coastal cities all across the world are going to feel the effects of that over the next 10 or 20 years. So yeah, we screwed the pooch there. You're 100% correct.
It might be time to move back to the Midwest. I don't know.
The Midwest, no. Come to the Mid-Atlantic. Come to the Great Lakes region. That's where the fun is. We got salt-free beaches, no sharks.
See,
Great.
but I still refer to that as the Midwest because I grew up in the Midwest and Lake Michigan was on our.
Well, yeah, that's the Midwest. I live in Pennsylvania. I don't consider it the Midwest. I live on Lake Erie. All right, let's move on. There was another mass shooting. There were probably multiple, but there was one that was mainstream in the media in Maine, Lewiston, Maine, where an Army reservist and certified firearms instructor went on a rampage and killed, I think, 18 people is where the count is now. He himself has been found dead, so the threat is gone. But my question to you, James, is all these conservatives talk about it's good to have a good guy with a gun, okay? Well, if a Army reservist...
They're coming for you.
Yeah, coming for somebody. Literally just drove by. If a Army reservist and certified firearms instructor is not a good guy with a gun, who is?
That's a good point.
But I'm pretty sure that's who they're talking about. They're talking about the responsible gun owners as being the good guys with guns. But when a responsible gun owner who is training other responsible gun owners is the perpetrator of a mass shooting, then who the fuck is a good guy with a gun?
So this ties directly in with a post that I just made in the last hour on TikTok where I stitched some goofy gun nut who was talking about Mike Johnson is already repealing anti-Second Amendment laws and bringing back our rights with regard to weapons. And so I challenged this guy to, first of all, tell me what rights has he lost in the last 3 years? And second of all, if he's talking about legislation that has been proposed or hasn't even been proposed yet, but has only been talked about regarding reducing gun violence, the best I can come up with is that the legislation that has any traction at all has to do with people who are mentally ill, who are convicted criminals, who are a danger to themselves or society, being restricted from possessing firearms. And so if this guy is out there cheering on the Second Amendment and Mike Johnson repealing these laws that are designed to keep guns out of the hands of dangerous people, then he's advocating for mentally ill to have guns. The Second Amendment crowd is advocating for the most dangerous people in our society to have free access to firearms. There's no getting around that, because when they're bitching about the legislation that is in their words, stripping them of their gun rights, the legislation speaks specifically to people who are a danger to themselves or society, that are mentally ill or have a criminal background. That's who they want to have guns. Those are the people being disenfranchised by anti-gun violence legislation, and that's what the Second Amendment crowd is fighting for. So there's so many layers to this that are just absolutely fucking maddening to me. And the guy that has just been elected Speaker of the House is an absolute abomination to humanity in his backing of the Second Amendment and all this other shit that that he stands behind. And the gun situation without actual radical legislation is not going to change. But my question about this guy in Maine,
Robert Card was his name. So
yeah, what did the victims have in common?
I think I got the answer queued up.
What did the victims have in common?
Well, one thing I read was that, I don't know if he was schizophrenic or whatever, but he said he heard them talking about him. I read that somewhere. But here's the thing: if there were any kind of stopgaps to prevent people who were very clearly a potential threat with a firearm from having a firearm. This guy wouldn't have had one. All right, so when he
Yep.
was last deployed over the summer with his Army Reserve unit, the U.S. Defense Department noted that he was behaving erratically. He was also in a hospital with mental health issues because he was considering shooting up a place. But they never took his guns from him, and he gets out and goes on a rampage. So, yeah, you're
Now
right.
his body
We
was
need to
found
do
in a
that
dumpster, from
well-regulated
what I
part
saw.
of the Second Amendment. We need to institute that.
Yeah,
You know?
I would refer back to the pinned post that's on my TikTok profile about what the Second Amendment really reads and what the verbiage in that is actually referring to, because that clears all this up. But his carcass was found in a dumpster, from what I heard. Is that correct?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. Let me see.
With a self-inflicted gunshot wound, but in a dumpster.
That's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't want to engage in conspiracy theories, but that is interesting. I mean, you can crawl into a dumpster and shoot yourself, I guess. Or you can hide in a dumpster. Maybe a cop will try to
Oh,
rob
in
you.
a recycling center trailer. That's the specifics
Yeah,
of it.
I mean, he was on the run, so maybe he was hiding, and then just decided he didn't want to deal with the consequences of his own actions. Uh, so yeah,
Wow. It's all, again, it's fucking awful because everything's awful. It's just,
everything is awful. We should get somebody to write that remake of that song from the Lego movie for us. All right, let's move on. The Trump gag order and his other adventures in judicial land. So he violated the gag order again. He got a $10,000 fine, which is nothing. When is Engoron going to grow a pair and treat him like he would treat you or I if we were in his courtroom?
this can't keep repeating. This has got months to go. There's at least 2, maybe 3 months left in that hearing. And it's pretty clear that Trump is going to continue acting like a spoiled fucking brat in and out of the courtroom. And that simply can't keep happening. There has to be a breaking point for this judge. I don't know what that breaking point is, but it's got to be there. This is going to become such a farce if this doesn't escalate in terms of the judge trying to contain his behavior. I would love to see him in a fucking ball gag and leg irons, duct taped to the chair in the courtroom, like they've done with some defendants in other cases. But it's a fucking joke.
Engoron, the first time he violated the gag order, should have laid out an escalation of punishments if he
Yep.
continued to do it. And it shouldn't have been long. Like the third step should have been prison. Maybe the
Mm-hmm.
fourth, all right? Give him 4 steps.
Yep.
So 10,000, 50,000, 100,000, prison. Right?
Well, it wouldn't. But to be specific, it wouldn't be prison. It would be jail. He'd put him in jail, and he would be there in between the days of the hearing. So every day that there's a hearing, they'd bring him out of the jail and put him in the courtroom, and he'd do something else that there's no escalation available to. That's the problem with this. Trump is willing to do anything. He's willing
Well,
to
it's all
say
he can
anything.
do. All he can do is get his supporters
Yeah.
to do violence for him to get him out
Yep.
of the trouble that he's in. That's all he can do.
Yep.
That's what he's hoping for. There's no
Yep.
doubt about it. So
That brings to mind, I saw an interview with tying this into Mike Johnson and the MAGA movement and everything around that. Matt Gaetz was on Steve Bannon's show recently, and he is absolutely Twitter-pated with MAGA Mike Johnson being elected Speaker of the House. Now, I'm going to play a clip, and I want you to pay attention to a specific statement that Gates says in this session with Steve Bannon. Let me make sure I got the right video here. I think it's
What, at the very end, when some people didn't know if they could still even bring back McCarthy, a few of them just left the room and didn't vote. And the swamp is on the run. MAGA is ascendant. And if you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention. But they are crying, they are hand-wringing and bedwetting over on K Street because we have an honorable, righteous man who is
Matt Gaetz, who fucks underage girls, has a boner for what he calls a righteous man.
Yeah, well, he's righteous in Matt Gaetz' eyes because he's anti-woman, he's anti-LGBTQIA. He voted to decertify the election in 2020. He's everything that the Freedom Caucus is. You know, anti-democracy, basically. That's what righteousness means to Matt Gaetz.
He is Mike Johnson is a horrible, horrible fucking person. It's just he is.
But it's funny. There was nobody. There are no Republicans with moral fiber today. There just aren't.
True.
So it didn't really matter who they came up with. It was going to be a horrible person. It's just how it is.
I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there was a time when you could have a argument with a Republican about policy, and you could disagree about that, and just, you know, you could know that they were wrong because they're following Reaganomics, which is bullshit, but you could still just, you know, have a cordial argument about that. That time is gone.
Those days are long gone. Yeah, and they're not coming back until the Republican Party is dismantled and somebody within that party stands up and says and disavows all of this. They had such an opportunity with this when Trump finally started to be held accountable for all this shit. Somebody in the Republican Party could have stood up and said, enough with this. We disavow this. And especially when now you're seeing people like Sidney Powell and the other gang of cretins in the Georgia case all pleading guilty and turning testimony against the rest of them. There was an opportunity for something to rise out of the Republican Party. The reason they didn't do that was because of the millions, the tens of millions of fucking people who still slob on the knob of the orange dickweed.
Why they didn't do that is because Liz Cheney and Adam Kinzinger did that. They tried to rise above the MAGA bullshit, and they both lost their elections. So,
because the numbers are still, you know, in terms of the population, there's still too many of these brain dead, zombified cultists that are valuable to the Republican Party as a whole. Mm-hmm. And we're seeing the people who are guilty of overturning an election, interfering with an election, and so forth, coming to terms with things much more quickly than the people who are out there still electing them and supporting them and cheering them on. And I don't know if this is going to change. I have so little hope for so few things. Ugh.
One thing that's worth noting, Sidney Powell and Kenneth Cheeseball or whatever the hell his name is.
Yes, bro.
And all the people that have pled, all three people that have pled guilty in that Georgia election interference case are all lawyers. They all saw the evidence against them and were like,
"Yeah,
we can't beat this, so we're going to plead guilty."
But roll that tape back to when they decided to become vested in pursuing these frivolous cases, and they knew then that it was bullshit, but they hedged their bets. We're gonna be protected. We're gonna get through this, and Trump's gonna win, and Trump's gonna protect us all.
What was the female lawyer? Not Powell, but the other one. Her name's escaping me right now.
Jenna Ellis.
Jenna Ellis, yeah. So when she was pleading guilty, tearfully pleading guilty, she said, "If I had known then what I know now, I would have never."
Bullshit.
supported Donald Trump. Yeah,
Oh
bullshit
God.
is right. Bullshit is right.
They just hedged. They hedged their bets and were banking on Trump blanketing them with something that would have given them immunity against prosecution for all
Right.
this fucking bullshit. Now the hammer is down, and yeah, I hope they all swing for it.
All right, you want to talk about genocide for a little bit? I don't have a lighthearted thing, by the way, to end this
I
episode
don't
with.
either.
We didn't
I don't.
last week,
I
so I
think
guess we're just gonna.
it would be disingenuous to insert something like that anyway because it just doesn't align with
Yeah,
the
that was our
reality of what's going
plan to
on.
always end on a lighthearted note, but yeah, we didn't last week, and doesn't seem like we're going to this week either. All right, so the genocide in Gaza is ongoing. It's turned into a ground invasion now. Uh, the one thing that I'm most disappointed about in this past week was when Biden chose to question the death toll of the Palestinians in Gaza. What the fuck was he
Read
doing
the,
that for?
read the fucking room, dude. Look out the goddamn window once in a while. Holy shit, that was a foul move.
Yeah, so
Um,
the Palestinian Authority responded with the list of 6,000 names and said these are people. They are people. They're fucking people. That's the problem.
entire
Mm-hmm.
families have been eliminated.
I mean, to be
Um,
honest, I'm just as disappointed in the Hamas's destruction of Israeli families and Israeli children, and none of it is good. None of it is good.
None
But
of it is good. None of it is good. But the Secretary General of the UN pointed out, and this is where Israel declared the UN persona non grata over this comment, is that the things that Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. These these things are in response to Israeli occupation and oppression of the Palestinian people. So it did not. It wasn't some random act of violence. It wasn't some rogue fucking execution of some plan. This happened in response to Palestinian or Israeli aggression against Palestinians. Not just the occupation, by the way, but recent events. You can kind of look at the last 2 years and you can pile up atrocities by Israel committed in the last 2 years that have devastated Palestinian communities. And then when you step back from that and you look at the level of disgusting control that Israel tries to exert on the people living specifically in Gaza. Now the West Bank is a different story. It has its own horror stories to deal with, but in Gaza alone, they have been choking the life out of the residents of that small strip of land, 25 miles by like 7 miles of earth, for decades. They can't. They they're not allowed to have an airport. They they don't get water. For fuck's sake, they don't get water without express permission from the Israeli government. There's so many things that are just systemic to what Israel has been using to choke the life out of that group of people, and they want them gone. They want them dead. They've been telling people in the West Bank, Palestinians in the West Bank, go to Jordan, flee to Jordan, go to Jordan. They're telling fucking the people of Gaza, go south, go into Egypt, go into the Sinai. They want that land. And the latest thing that I've seen with this is that there are natural gas and oil fields just off the coast of Gaza that are within Gaza's domain, because there is a line where the Israelis prevent Gazan fishermen from going out, but these oil fields are within the territory of Gaza, that Israel has plans for. They want access to. There is a long game in this, and there's a short game. Israel has been waiting to do this for a long time. This has been on their agenda. In fact, let me put up the other video right now, and this should shake you to your core.
Our war against Hamas is a test for all of humanity. It is a struggle between the axis of evil of Iran, Hezbollah, and Hamas, and the axis of freedom and progress. We are the people of the light. They are the people of darkness, and light shall triumph over darkness. Citizens of Israel, October 7th was a very dark and black day in our history. We will fully investigate what had happened at our southern border, the border with Gaza. Everybody will have to provide answers, myself included, but all that will happen only after the war. As a prime minister, I'm responsible for guaranteeing the future of this country, and now my role is to lead all Israelis, the state of Israel and the people of Israel, to an overpowering victory. It is now a time to come together for one purpose, to storm ahead to achieve victory. With joint forces and a profound belief in our justness, a profound belief in the eternity of the Jewish people, we shall realize the prophecy of Isaiah. There will no longer be stealing at your...
All right, enough.
All right, now imagine after 9/11, if the United States response was, Bin Laden is Saudi, so we're going to kill every man, woman, and child in Saudi Arabia. Because that's what Netanyahu was just basically saying he's going to do.
There was a comparison that I saw with the Secretary of State talking about Russia killing civilians in Ukraine and how contrary to humanity that was, and just really standing behind the civilians in Ukraine. And then they flipped to a video of the Secretary of State talking about the necessary cost of civilians in Gaza in this conflict. The difference between the two is stark, and it really should open your eyes to what the agenda of the United States in this is. The lack of basic human dignity and respect afforded to the Palestinian people, who have been oppressed and are subject to an active campaign of genocide, is something that should not be part of U.S. policy. We have lowered ourselves to the worst, lowest, most disgusting fucking level in this. Now, we have now two carrier groups in the Mediterranean off the coast of Gaza, the Dwight D. Eisenhower, and I think it's the Gerald R. Ford.
Yep.
That's two aircraft carriers, gunships, battleships, cruisers, an enormous amount of firepower there. Strictly, now I saw a really good breakdown of this on YouTube. Caspian is the name of the YouTube channel. I should have brought a link to it, but talking about what the purpose of those strike groups being there is as we said in, I think it was last week,
Right.
to keep Iran and Lebanon from entering this conflict. And the chances, even with those strike groups there, of Hezbollah in Iran, I think in the south of Lebanon, Hezbollah is already also there, but Islamic Jihad, and there's other groups that are in the south of Lebanon. By the way, Israel's been striking in Lebanon since started.
Rockets have been coming from Lebanon, so I guess that's how that happens.
The
Syria this week.
Yeah,
we launched some missiles into Syria this week.
Allegedly in response to missiles that came from Iranian assets in Syria that targeted some remaining U.S. bases in Iraq, I think it was.
Yeah.
Even though officially we don't have bases in Iraq anymore. Wink, wink.
And look, I don't have a problem with the carrier groups being there to prevent Iran and Lebanon and Saudi Arabia or anyone else from getting involved in the conflict, if they also were preventing Israel from being involved in the conflict, right? The only purpose of the United States military in the Middle East should be to prevent all of the killing that's going on of civilians all over. We shouldn't be picking a side, which we clearly have, and I don't like that.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That the use of those assets of ours being there should deter Israel from doing what they're doing in Gaza, as well as deter Hamas in Gaza from escalating this further. That would be. That's not what it is, though. That's not.
No, that's
That's
not
not
what
why
it is.
they're there.
That's what it would be if we weren't living in dystopia.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
would be.
But this breakdown that I saw of that whole dynamic between Syria, Iran, Lebanon, and other players in the area, the possibility and the real risk of Hezbollah, which has an enormous arsenal. Hezbollah is not the Hezbollah of 15 years ago. Hezbollah is a heavily funded $700 billion from Iran in the last 5 years, funding a non-state actor, which is Hezbollah. They are well equipped, they are well trained, and at some point, somebody needs to stand up and say who is going to defend the Palestinians. Hamas is not capable of defending the Palestinian people. Hamas is capable of antagonizing Israel, and then Israel responds the way that they do, which is completely unjustified and immoral. But at that point, who is going to defend the Palestinian people? And the only answer to that is Hezbollah and Iran. And at some point, Iran is going to call the bluff of the U.S. assets sitting off the coast. And the decision that the U.S. makes in response to, let's say Iran decides to roll through Israel and put themselves in Gaza and in the West Bank, the U.S. response to that is going to change everything. The fact that, Israel will do what they're going to do with that, but the U.S. response to that is pivotal in every way for the next generation. It's
100%. Is the United States going to say, okay, well, that's an escalation that we're not in support of. Israel, it's time to get to the, peace table. Let's end this ceasefire, all that. Or are we going to keep giving Israel arms and helping them continue the genocide? What are we going to do? What are we going to do, Joe Biden? What are we going to do?
And the momentum against Joe Biden from the left end spectrum of the political machine in the United States is enormous right now. There was a long period of time where people who didn't consider themselves Democrats, who called themselves leftists, would not necessarily stand up and declare, there's no fucking way I'm voting for Joe Biden. The number of people today who are standing up and saying this, because the sort of things that were hanging by a thread prior to the Palestinian escalation had to do with Joe Biden's too fucking old and approaching dementia and so forth. That I'm gonna swallow the bitter pill and cast my vote for Biden if he's the candidate. And those people have now shifted for a very good fucking reason to declare there's no fucking way I'm voting for Biden. And I cannot fault these individuals for taking that position.
No,
I think it's a
we talked about that last week.
Move.
Vote blue no matter who is bullshit, because there are plenty of Democrats who don't support anything to the left of what Republicans support, really. And Biden is pretty much one of them. So he has a challenger now. He's going to be facing a primary challenger. Dean Phillips, a House member from New Hampshire, running against Biden in the Democratic primary for 2024. So you do have a choice. I don't know what his shot is. And he's voted with Biden on everything. in the House. So,
and that's the problem, is that this guy doesn't sound like he's any different than any other Democrat who has supported the policies of Joe Biden, supported the weak policies of the Democratic Party for God knows how long. Um, and that speaks to the biggest problem in this entire political machine, is that we will never have a candidate, I don't care who the fuck you think it is, in the Democrat Party or the Republican Party, that is going, if you're going to say the Palestinian issue and the choice by the US government to stand in solidarity with an agenda of genocide against an entire population of people, you're never going to have a candidate in the Democratic Party of any sort that's going to take a position contrary to Israel. You're certainly never going to have a candidate in the Republican Party that's going to take that position. The last individual in my lifetime who stood in solidarity clearly with the Palestinian people was Jimmy fucking Carter. And there's no one on the horizon who is going to. I even watch interviews with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who she is so hesitant to criticize Israel. She'll step up to the brink and then dance back with it.
yeah, well, I mean, she represents a district in New York City that she
Heavily
needs to do
Jewish.
as well. And people conflate that. They conflate Jewish equals Israel, but there's been plenty of Jewish people very outspoken against the actions of Israel in this conflict.
Absolutely,
There's been a
absolutely.
lot.
There is a difference between somebody who's Israeli and somebody who's Zionist, and somebody who's Israeli and or Jewish and Zionist. They're not the same thing. But the lobby that has the momentum and has the power and the influence is the Zionist population.
Right.
So it should, by next week, I think we're going to have a hell of a lot more to look back on in this particular situation. I think that's as obvious as can be, that shit is going to look very different by this time next week, and none of it's going to be good. It's not going to be good.
Right. So, in addition to what's going on in Russia, Ukraine, Israel and Gaza, Armenia and Azerbaijan are having a little conflict. Now, what happened there is they both were pretty much protectorates under Putin. And Armenia, I want to say, has pulled back from that and wants to be more friendly with the West, and that has caused conflict. There's contested territory between the two that they've fought over. So that's another hot spot. You also got the Kashmir area in between India and Pakistan. They always are ready to fight over that if the opportunity arrives. And then this is the scariest thing: the Chinese. I don't know if it was the president or if it was just a defense minister or somebody, but they made a public statement, which was obviously very calculated, where they accused the United States of exaggerating their military prowess. Now, why would you do that unless you're trying to get allies to not fear the United States military and join you when you go to take over Taiwan or whatever the hell else China wants to do, right?
Well, I haven't heard that, but that's interesting in the context of the fact that the Chinese ambassador to the UN has stated very clearly his support of the Palestinian cause, and China has definitely fallen on that side of the spectrum with regard to this. So if you relate that to that current conflict, Iran is listening to that, and I think I would bet you that in the next 7 days before our next podcast, you're going to see incidents of either state assets of the Iranian government or non-state actors sponsored by Iran directly testing the will of the American firepower that's sitting off the coast in the Mediterranean. There's going to be something that happens in the next week where they directly test the resolve of the U.S. in that regard, and that's going to be sort of an exploratory mission to find out exactly how they're going to be responded to. I mean, it's one thing to launch missiles out of Yemen or Syria, and there's missile interceptor batteries, Patriot and Iron Dome and others that will take them out. But if we're going to, we've got aircraft in the area. Those aircraft aren't just sitting on those aircraft carriers. They are flying sorties all the time, and you're going to see something happen between Iranian assets and the U.S. assets. I bet you in the next week, and that's going to set the stage for where this goes from here.
I mean, that's not Iran has tested our assets before.
Yeah.
USS Cole comes to mind. That was 20 years ago, but
yep,
they put a hole in a U.S. warship.
Yep, killed a dozen people on that warship. Yep.
Yeah. So Iran has done that before, and it wouldn't be a surprise if they did it again. And China has been testing. They've been flying very close to our reconnaissance aircraft that fly around Taiwan all the time, that have for decades. Yep. China's been flying very close. There was one video from a U.S. plane where, I mean, the Chinese aircraft didn't seem like it was more than 100 feet away. That was crazy.
No, in fact, the video I saw was of a Canadian military transport plane that was flying in that area, and there was a reporter on that plane, and that Chinese fighter was less than 10 feet off
that might
the wing.
That might be the video I'm referring to.
Yeah.
That might be the same
yeah,
video.
they're very emboldened. The Chinese pilots are incredibly skilled, and they're very brazen in terms of what they do, because they've been doing this since Bush the Younger's term. There was an incident in Bush, George W. Bush's term, where a Chinese fighter clipped the radar dome off the front of, I think it was a KC-130.
And it had to land in China, right?
Yeah, and they were kind of not held prisoner, but they were definitely detained for a couple of weeks before they were released. Yeah, that was some shit.
Oh, I don't have anything else on the agenda. Can we do something lighthearted to lighten up the episode a little?
If you've got, I'm not going to dance for you again.
Here we go.
You still owe me for that.
Here's Baxter. Baxter's going to light up.
Oh my God.
We're going to lighten up the episode. Good boy.
This is a good dog.
Good boy. All right. Well, that's it for this week then. Thank you for listening to Leftist Lens. Remember, if you want to fight with us in the comments, can't wait to fight back. If you agree with us, then sure, go ahead and agree with us. But I'm really looking forward to some MAGA people coming and giving us their 2 cents, so we can have more content for next week with all the stupid shit they'll say. But anyway, take care of each other, and we'll see you next week.
Peace out.